Hey, everybody. We're here with Pastor Tom Hughes. He was able to come to our Truth About Israel conference, and we were blessed to have him come. And he's going to be talking about what he's discussing at our conference. And again, you can go on our website to get the full conference and hear all of the presentations. And so click on the tab that can download the whole conference for you. You can watch it for 30 days and share that information with whoever you might think that needs that information. Anyway, I got Tom with us. So Tom, tell us what you're going to be teaching at the conference.
I am going to be teaching on what the Bible actually says about the people of Israel. Did God indeed promise Israel the land?
Yeah.
Did Israel get replaced by the church? Or do the Jews have any right to the land? Even are the Jews who are in Israel, are they really the Jews of the Bible? And what does the Bible actually say about this? Because if it's not true, if God didn't really promise Israel the land, then you start looking at political things that are taking place, and it brings up a lot of questions.
Right.
But if God does say certain things applying to Israel, like there's a covenant, for example, and it lasts forever, is it validated also in the New Testament? Is it in the Old Testament? What does the Bible actually say, Old and New Testament, about the people of Israel? And what is Zionism? You know, and we hear the term Zion. Where does that come from? Was it just something some guy named Theodore Herzl made up in the late 1800s? Or what's this term?
So let's capitalize on that, because we hear people that are anti-Zion. They say, well, I'm not anti-Semitic, but I'm anti-Zion. And well, wait a second. What do you mean by that? That the Jews don't have the right to the land? Speak into that and talk about the shades of meaning, what they're trying to get around about saying, well, I'm not anti-Jewish, but I'm anti-Zion, because it seems to me that's an anti-Semitic statement.
Yeah, well, when you look at it, and when you look at the word Zion in the Bible, and this is what I would encourage anybody to do their own study on it, and see what God says about Zion. 152 times in the King James Bible, we have the term Zion used in a favorable way about God and it being for him and his people. He even says regarding Zion, which is not just the Temple Mount, is Jerusalem. When we think of the old city of Jerusalem, it's that whole hill there. And God says, not only is Zion mine, but my people are going to be in Zion. My king, meaning Jesus, Yeshua, is going to be back, and he's going to be ruling from there. And you see it repeatedly in the Bible. And so when people say, well, I'm just not a Zionist, I'm not anti-Semitic, but I'm not a Zionist, well, that presents a little bit of a problem if you look at what the Bible actually says about Zion, because God is a Zionist. And so does that mean a person then is anti-God, who says, well, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist? Well, I just would challenge people, look at the Bible for yourself, because we have all kinds of people that are saying, pastors, politicians, all over the media, left and right media, all over the place. You know, we would expect things from the universities. We'd expect them from AOC, Ilhan Omar, and all these other people, Barack Obama, or whatever. We would expect these types of things. But now we're hearing them from the right. We're hearing them from churches in a way that we never even heard before. And there's like an explosion of these kind of terms. So when I look at it and think, you know, all you got to do is see what the Bible says. Don't just listen to the pundit. Go actually look at your Bible, which we are doing here. What does the Bible actually say, so we know why we believe what we actually think, or help us to think correctly, Lord.
That's great. So let's talk about this too, because you mentioned it, this dreaded replacement theology, and we're seeing the silence from the churches. And is a lot of that silence tied to replacement theology, or is there more behind that?
I think it's both. So a lot of the silence is from replacement theology, and you know, you and I have known for years when there's been so many teachers out there in the churches that have said the majority of people believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. They do not. Both of us have said that for so long. No, the majority of churches in the Western world do not believe in a rapture. They don't believe in a pre-millennial kingdom. They don't believe Jesus is going to come back and establish a millennial kingdom. They don't believe any of that. That's been the majority of thinking for as long as I've been a Christian anyways, 35 years. So, and then so you have replacement theology that comes from amillennial teaching, and even post-millennial teaching, meaning amillennial, there's no millennial kingdom. Post-millennial, and this is what's happening now on the right, not just amillennial, but post-millennial. We're going to fix the world. After we fix it, then Jesus will come back.
Wow.
So when you have a post-millennial foundation, right now, this is what's happened, I think, in the church. The replacement theology is one problem. This is another. They see it as, since we're going to fix the world, Israel's a problem. Yeah. Israel's been a problem since 1948. There never should have been this British mandate. Yeah. All of these other things. No, we got to handle this Israel problem, and then we're going to fix everything. So fixing everything means we're going to fix Israel. Yeah. We're gonna pull all their teeth out. They aren't gonna have any strength anymore. Yeah. And that's what they're doing. Yeah. But it's based on both those foundations of what I would call bad theology. Amillennial teaching leads to replacement theology. God's done with Israel. Post-millennial, we're gonna fix the world. So let's us fix the problem of Israel. Yeah. Because we never had these problems until Israel became a nation again.
Yeah, you're hitting on something. And I see this from not only the leftists, but I see it in conservative circles, and I see it even in Christian circles, that if there was no state of Israel, then the world would be at peace, or at least the Middle East would be at peace. But then that begs the question, where do you want them to go, the Jews? How do you address that when someone says that, well, if there wasn't no state of Israel, we wouldn't have any problems? What's the answer to that?
Well, we know that's a lie. You and I know it's a lie. And that's a simple question. Okay, since you don't want the Jews to live in Israel, do you want them in your neighborhood? Well, you don't want them in LA. We know that because we see them being attacked. Yeah. Don't want them in New York, in the Jewish communities. They'll say, well, let them have their own Jewish communities. Well, they have their own Jewish communities. Guess what? They're getting attacked in their own Jewish communities. Yeah. So we know it's a lie. And then you say, well, maybe they can come and live in my city. Maybe you're friendly with Jews, but there's many people that aren't. So they're not accepted anywhere. Yeah. And so it's not just eliminate them from the land of Israel, but it's eliminate them from the planet, which really is a spiritual dynamic that apart from conversations like this and a conference like this, nobody's talking about the spiritual, the reality of the spiritual war that is going on. Right. It's behind the curtain, and you can understand it if you're willing to actually look at the depth of the Bible and what the Bible actually teaches.
Yeah, absolutely. You're hitting on a good point. For those who may not know, help people understand the importance of Israel and tied to the second coming. Because even most Christians, even you take outside, just in Christendom in general, believe in the second coming. Okay. But then we see different aspects tied to that second coming that predicate the second coming. And it has to do with Israel. Explain to people that may not know that, how the second coming is tied to Israel.
Yeah. Well, there's no way that Jesus can come back or will come back until several things have to happen. One of them is the Jews have to be back in the land. Okay. Yeah. Another one, they have to own Jerusalem. Yeah. And have Israel. You know, when Israel is accused of being the occupier, no, not exactly. It's the land that's being occupied by terrorists and other groups. But Israel is the time clock. It's the epicenter, as I think Joel Rosenberg calls it, especially with the Temple Mount. Yeah. We know there must be a temple. So there's certain things that must exist before Jesus comes back. Those things, Jews back in the land in unbelief, which is what Ezekiel 36 describes. Yeah. The Jews are gathered back first in unbelief. A temple will be built. We know that because we know from the Bible there will be an antichrist that's going to sit in the temple. We know sacrifices will begin again because we know from Daniel chapter 9, he puts an end to the sacrifices. Right. So we know those have to happen again. There's certain things. But you can look at any generation since Jesus ascended into heaven, book of Acts. No generation could possibly say that they were the generation until now that Jesus could come back. Because although you could have everything else taking place, pestilences, earthquakes in various places, wars and rumors of wars, which is in the description of everything escalating in like birth pains and frequency and intensity. But if the Jews were not back in the land, they would just be events. But since the Jews are back in the land, at a time when all of these things are escalating in a way that we've never seen before nor experienced before, it gives us a placeholder for our time to say, look, how many more warnings can God give us? It's like when we look at, you go to the last 4 years of lockdowns and insanity, and then how many people could look at that and say that was normal? Some people did. Some people thought it was normal to wear a mask, you know, but no, there's nothing normal about what has happened. You look at digital currency, you look at all these different things, but the real factor is the Jews are back in the land, and we see the wars and rumors of wars escalating in Israel. And I believe what's taking place now, Brandon, will be out of this, and you and I have talked about this recently, out of this, there will be a peace and security agreement that will be achieved. Will it be achieved right away? Don't know that. But it will be, I think, the major talking point when when everything is done here with Israel, as they come out of this, the pressure from the world leaders on Israel to enter into a peace and security agreement is going to be something they've never experienced before. That you talk to Israelis, they know it's coming because they can see the growing anti-Semitism. And but the time clock is Israel, the Jews being back in the land. And the increase of anti-Semitism too. We know all the world's going to gather against Israel, against the Jews, but it is a spiritual battle. So this is why we look now and say, look, you better get your act together and get right with the Lord, because this thing is going down. And when Jesus comes back next time, it's as a judge.
That's right. That's right. Hey, one more thing. This topic of Israel, you and I have talked off air about, obviously, Israel, but we've talked about the sifting of the church. And over the last few years, there's been some sifting. We've seen the sifting, I think, with COVID and the shutdowns. Do you think that the topic of Israel and this issue now is a sifting issue with the church?
Absolutely. In a way that I don't think I really quite expected. You know, in fact, I could go back to 2018 and think, okay, you read about pestilences increasing, and we could read about experiments Bill Gates was doing in Africa years ago. In fact, you used to be able to talk about those things on YouTube.
Right.
But so when I didn't know COVID was going to be, things were going to be manipulated quite the way they were, right? And we saw that, but I was surprised by some of it. I was surprised by how easily churches closed. How many pastors just closed doors. But then we realized, you know, you and I have had this conversation, we realized pastors weren't teaching the Bible. So therefore, that's whatever the state says. Okay, now it's been taken to a whole nother level over Israel. So there's brothers that we felt linked arm in arm with over COVID, but now we're seeing many of them are saying, I'm not with you on Israel. They won't even talk about Israel. They were willing to talk about vaccines. They're unwilling to talk about Israel. It's too divisive. But I do believe, again, I think what's happened within the church, a lot of it has been political posturizing. So when you look at going back again to post-millennial thinking, we're going to fix the world. So we see the government's doing something bad, hence COVID, mandates, digital currency. You guys are bad. The problem is they see with Israel, it's a different ballgame. So they see Israel as being the problem. So you have all these conspiracies about what Israel is doing. They were behind the original tax. They're part of the World Economic Forum. It's part of their plan. And so we're witnessing all of these conversations take place. And so within the church, you had, we're in agreement with you politically because we see the tyranny of the government. In this case, they see Israel as being part of that tyranny. And therefore, they don't see the spiritual. Spiritually, they're not connecting. Politically is what their connection is.
Good point. That's an excellent point. And I think that gap is going to widen, I think, as we continue on. I don't think this war is over. Do you see this war branching into setting the table for other things, other fronts, and eventually leading into maybe Gog of Magog? Where do you see this going?
Well, we know eventually Ezekiel 38 will be fulfilled. We don't know the timing on it. Now, what's interesting to me is in Ezekiel 38, this is my interpretation. Not everybody agrees with me, but twice in Ezekiel 38, we know that Israel, when they're gathered back, and man, the current anti-Semitism is really causing people to say, I got to move from LA, I got to move from New York, I got to get out of here. But they're going to be gathered back twice in Ezekiel 38. It'll be a land of safety. Okay, so that could be they've beefed up their IDF. Yeah. They have more weapons now. That could lead to that. The problem is in verse 11, it says a peaceful people, or as King James says, a people at rest and in safety. The term for rest there is a Hebrew term. It means tranquility. Yeah. So at a place when they're in a tranquil state, it's not just safe, but they're tranquil. Yeah. So they're not there. Israel's never been there since Solomon. Never. Right. So they have to get there. So I think this current event will lead something to take place with Israel where they're going to end up peace and security in a tranquil place. They've got to get there before Ezekiel 38 takes place. That's my interpretation based upon that verse and a couple others.
It's just amazing that we live in a time. Ezekiel made that prophecy 2,500 years ago, and here we are watching the setup of that right in front of our very eyes. And like you say, the time is short, and I think folks out there, you guys need to make sure you're saved and you're getting other people saved, obviously, through all of this, because we're seeing things wrap up, and we're seeing the interchange between the end of the church age and then God using Israel again. And so we're in that overlap period right now. So we're close, guys. Anyway, if for more information, again, download the entire the conference. You're going to hear Tom's great presentation. He's going to explain all of this in his presentation, along with the other speakers. And again, your job, take this information and share it. We want this information, the truth about Israel, out so people can understand and stop the lies and propaganda, okay? All right, guys, God bless you. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you, man.
All right, thank you.
All right.